That's another announcement. React content is back, and we're going to start off with this one. Are they the same thing? WoW's Jailer and FF14's Endsinger fight.
Hey everyone, it's been a year since Endwalker came out, and the newest World of Warcraft expansion is here, so I shouldn't have to say spoiler warning, but I'm gonna do it anyway. The following video contains some pretty big spoilers for Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker and World of Warcraft Shadowlands, because this video is about the final bosses of these expansions and how on paper they appear to be the exact same thing. I'm sure some of you are aware of that Final Fantasy XIV versus World of Warcraft video I made last year.
Okay, so we're gonna start here for a second. Kinda not on comparing the two. Kind of in the fact that like they're both extremely universe-ending entities. Not on the fact that Endsinger is just like she's kind of the character of Endsinger is I'm going to put you all down because life is terrible. We all need to die. And the Jailer is more so of a character of like I'm trying to rewrite reality and make it right in my vision. I think those are two different concepts completely, but
And as a fan
I'm
of
excited
both
to see
WoW
more.
And
So
FF14, for to be honest, entirely different reasons, I still find myself comparing the two from time to time, what one does well compared to the
I mean, all the time. Let's be honest. You compare them all the time.
other and vice versa. And if you've ever seen a
So does
stream or
everyone
replay
else
of
who's
mine,
played
you
both.
know I am a fan of tropes. I love them. I love being able to see them coming from a mile away. It's honestly how I end up guessing the plot to most of the things I play, and it's why I love a good mystery. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, a trope is a common convention in a particular medium. Something used enough to be recognized as that thing. Storytelling uses tropes all the time, and these two games love their tropes. Things like the enemy of my enemy trope, the tragic villain trope, the magic is a monster magnet trope, or one of my favorites, the chivalrous pervert trope. All of these are examples of tropes, and there are so many tropes. And yeah, I enjoy some more than others. One of the ones I've never been a fan of, but MMOs love to do, is the true final boss, or man behind the man, or greater scope villain trope. All of which can really just be summed up like this. You arrive at the final boss of a video game, and as you do a battle, they say something along the lines of like, "You fools, all this evil stuff I've been doing is actually to prevent something much worse from happening, and that worst guy, you don't even know him yet, but he's terrible." And then, depending on the scope of the game, the guy either shows up right then as the form of something totally insane, or in the case of most MMORPGs, they become the focus of the next expansion. I think it's safe to say we've all seen this before, and it drives me crazy, because I've always thought it just seems like they were kicking the narrative can down the road. But I will admit,
Fair, kind of. And I'll say this is the reason why. I don't think that a good story written up to a point of completing said story is defeated by a bigger bad coming in. I think that all the narrative points that lead up to you, the final confrontation against the guy that you really want to destroy or defeat or to overcome, I think all the points leading up until that moment matter. And then the completion of that does matter, even if there's a next step. I think in a lot of ways, the next step is realistic and makes sense because the world doesn't just end when you complete a story arc like that. You don't just, oh, I've beaten the big bad guy. Now everything's fine, hunky dory. Usually that's not what happens. There's an aftermath chain of events, and in most cases, the boss is getting power from some entity, something. Even like some of the strongest characters in all of D&D get power from something or some other place, right? I just it makes sense to me that there'd be another person behind the thing. And I don't think I don't think that defeats it at all.
it is a great
Rub the slit,
and
yeah.
easy hook to
100%
get
we're
people
rubbing the
invested
slit.
on what's to come next. But with that said, it can get very stale very quick, which is why I'm very much over.
When it's repeated back to back, that's the frustrating part. When it's like, oh, all of this came together and we killed the guy, and then like the real big bad showed up. That's wow, that's crazy. The first time it happens, it's nuts. After it happens 6 times in a row, you're like, okay, hold on. So if he's talking about like that, yes, 100% bad.
So
I like it whenever, I'm just going to say it real quick. I'm going to spoil my whole narrative thought process on how stories should work. A story should have a really big build up to the first climactic part of the series. So a story should have like maybe 2 to 3 books building up to the first climax of the series, where there is a big confrontation, something catastrophic happens, and a big bad evil releases. That big bad evil is the real big bad evil. But it's never changed. That is the guy. And when it's kind of like revealing the true bad guy at like book 3 when there's actually 9 books. So you know what the bad guy is at book 3 for book 9, right? It's kind of like Harry Potter, right? You kind of know about Voldemort, blah, 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 blah. But then he finally shows himself at the tournament event, right? That book reveals Voldemort in his prime. He's resurrected, right? That is prime storytelling. I'm not a J.K. Rowling's fan as a person, but the way that she built that story up is exactly how I enjoy stories, where a lot of different events, a lot of different bad guys lead up to the big bad guy's reveal. And then there's side bad guys leading up until you get to the real bad guy at the end of the series. I think that's perfect.
So, when both Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft Shadowlands release expansions where the villain we start chasing at the beginning turns out not to be the final boss of the expansion, but instead
I don't think it's overused if you... See, here's the thing, right? It's not overused if, let's say in World of Warcraft, right? If at the moment we killed the Lich King, the jailer appeared, right? If the moment we murdered him, the jailer appeared in Wrath of the Lich King and was like, "You have no idea what's going on. I have plans for this reality." Now, if that shit happened and it was built up that, hey, whoa, there's a big bald man somewhere in the world, I mean, I would be thinking about him a lot for like the next 10 so years. That's good build-up. I know he's there. And then we get like breadcrumbs about him throughout the years. It's never focused on him because, you know, there are other threats, like the old gods are being annoying on our planet. There's other threats have yet to discover. So we're dealing with all these side things that lead up to the big bad. And then boom, we're at the jailer, right? And it's the end. It's the end in one way or another. Maybe it's the beginning of WoW 2, but it is the end, whether what happens here dictates the rest of the story. But he's the big bad. And they let us know from Wrath of the Lich King onwards. But they didn't do that, right? They retconned a lot of story, and for we never even heard about the jailer until like the last expansion, right? So not until Shadowlands did we even hear his name. So it's one of those things where it's like, you can't just do that. So
is that other even worse thing. In this case, the Endsinger and the jailer. Two characters that we know nothing about. We're about to enter a game where we have zero connection to
just the comments you made, Daniel. You know Voldemort's trying to return since book 1, but it hasn't happened yet, right? So he's not the big bad. You just know, you and everyone else knows that he is a threat that could return. And then throughout the years, you're trying to figure out, like, is Snape a bad guy? Who's this guy? What is going on with Tom Riddle's soul? What is all this stuff? Like, there's just like back and forth, like whispers, like, oh well, maybe Voldemort will just be an echo, and like Tom Riddle being killed will be like the end of that story, and then it builds up to the final reveal that no, he is back, right? I'm sure it's like, yeah, narratively, you probably can tell from a mile away that, yeah, of course he's going to come back. And of course he's like the bad guy. And of course it's this and of course it's that. But I'm saying, like, for a narrative, the big reveal of like, oh, he is definitely here is executed perfectly. 1, 2, 3, 4 books. Boom, big bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books. Ending, right?
To the villain, and even worse, don't really know or care about
Yeah,
their
yeah,
motivations.
I know.
And yes, that was the case with Shadowlands. So then how the hell did Final Fantasy XIV make it work? Well, let's start with the baseline of Shadowlands. When you look at what they're trying to do, it seems like a creative outing. Just the very concept of setting your expansion in the afterlife is a pretty huge undertaking. And going into the expansion, we're dealing with an enemy who's undead, Sylvanas, spent the previous expansion murdering her way through Azeroth and pissing everyone off, except you Undercity fans, I see you. As the story progressed, it was very clear something more was going on. There was something happening behind the scenes. She had a dark master, but she still claimed that she was doing her evil deeds for a reason. And in the run-up to Shadowlands, it was revealed her dark master was the jailer. Obviously, from my perspective, I think the entire thing ended up being a big failure. In an effort to have diverse zones and new characters, we spent a lot of time focusing on stuff that I didn't feel was all that important. There didn't really seem to be a lot of cohesion between the zones, except for the Game of Thrones level politics happening between the leaders. And the stuff I did want to see more of and hopefully get answers to really wasn't delivered. I figured this expansion would give us a lot of Sylvanas' story, maybe even explain why everyone kept telling us that she was morally gray, but we didn't really get any of that. And by the time her story wrapped up, we didn't even get to see a reunion between her and Nathanos, right? Because the story quickly had to move on to explaining what the hell her boss was up to. A man who at that point in the story you've seen being evil in a few cutscenes, but is really still shrouded in mystery. We kind of know what he wants to do, but we don't know why, we don't know what his end goal is. It's really the quintessential problem with the true final boss or man behind the man trope.
I really felt like the jailer, right? This is a side tangent. That the jailer had the potential to be like really cool if they treated him like they treated what's his name from Shadowbringers? Starts with an E. I forget. Emmett Selk. If they treated him like Emmett Selk and like made him really, really strong and kind of like to the point where he felt comfortable just chatting. Like, it'd have been cool just to have the jailer be like, I'm going to come by and swing by and just talk for a minute. And just have a chat and be like, hey, you know, this is what's going on. This is how I'm feeling. I was betrayed. I want to see what you guys are trying to do. What y'all's plan for this? Do you guys have a solution for this? I would have loved to have seen things like that happen. I mean, obviously not as obvious and overt like I just said, but like I would have liked to have seen him like try to test us in a way, because his entire thing was, I'm trying to protect us from a bigger thing. Well, then, like, why don't you try to test the thing that's been overcoming obstacles over and over again? It makes sense that you'd want to see the obstacles getting, you know, redone in a better way. I don't know. It just seems to me like it would have been cooler.
We're told by people we just met, who we're told are important, to go kill this guy because it's for the greater good. And that is pretty much what we do. We're still never really told why he's doing any of the things he's doing, but we know that he's going to rewrite reality, and it's our job to stop him. Once he's defeated, we're shown a very quick and pretty flimsy explanation of why he did what he did. But at that point, honestly, it's way too late. Apparently, he was once the arbiter of the afterlife and decided the first one's creations were defective and unable to withstand the, yeah, you got it, greater scope villain to come. Yeah, that's right. The one true final boss who we've come to learn has orchestrated everything since the beginning of us playing. It's actually revealed that there is another something that's even worse than he is, and it's coming, and he was trying to be prepared for it, I guess, and now you, the player, have to stick around to the next expansion, I assume, in order to find out more. So yeah, that sucked, and it still sucks saying it out loud again. But it should at least be understandable why it sucks now. There was nothing at stake for the player. Sure, you're told there was, but I don't know anyone who found the jailer fight resonate with them on a...
Sure, I mean, there's never any stakes for the player in any game. in Final Fantasy either. All the stakes are just, fabricated. So
An emotional level other than, oh look, new loot. So then let's bring it back and ask again, how on earth could this increasingly lame trope end up so differently in Final Fantasy XIV? Well, before we even start, Final Fantasy XIV is a story-heavy game, unlike WoW. So the onus is on the 14 dev team to make this trope work. They've got more real estate in their game for storytelling, but still, it's not an easy trope to make good.
they also do a really good job in Final Fantasy of giving us the background story of the bad guy before we fight them. We got an in-depth background story about the Endsinger fight before we ever thought we were going to fight her. We got an in-depth, emotional, and intimate relationship with the person that we were going to at one point kill. And that is why.
So let's start with the previous expansion. Just like Battle for Azeroth, the story beats were being set up in Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. In it, the villain mentions that the reasoning for all their schemes was that, long ago, their people were killed in a great calamity, and the cause was this mysterious song or sound from space. It warped their...
Actually, no, Daniel. I will say this, everyone who plays these games knows for a fact that we're going to win. Okay? It's an MMO. It's a hero story. We're going to win. The thing that's really scary in Final Fantasy XIV is you never know if one of your friends are going to die. Because at some point they might. Like Papa Limo, what's her fucking name? Heidelin's Chosen. At any point, they could die, and that's where the stakes are at, because you love those characters so much. We won. We did. We beat the Garleans, we won Praetorium, we saved everybody, we won. They broke the world. We won. We won. 1.0 doesn't count. 1.0 doesn't count, dude. You don't count 1.0. It's 2.0 onwards.
Their dark deity Zodiark.
Counting 1.0.
Same Zodiark we've been
No. Counting 1.0 is not fair. Because 1.0... No. 1.0 happened because the game was dog shit. That's why 1.0 happened. We do not count 1.0 because they didn't build that narrative intentionally. That was not intentional. Yeah, it's canon. Of course it is. What I'm trying to say is that was not an intentional part of the story. Everything from before 2.0 is not canon in my brain as far as the intent of emotional connection and loss. That was not built up to happen. The game had loss because the game was going to fucking die. That's different. That's a 100% different narrative thing. That's not even narrative. That's just real life issues. That has nothing to do with narrative at all. They tied the narrative into it, but you cannot connect the two. 1.0 is trash, is just not an excuse for narrative.
Trying to fight since the beginning, could they stop this mysterious song? But it's still kind of an amorphous concept, a weird footnote that is really not delved into. And like Shadowlands, the plot of Endwalker is pretty straightforward. I mean, if you keep the end of Shadowbringers vague enough, it does kind of sound like BFA as well. The secret behind-the-scenes evil corrupting our world from the beginning has finally been defeated. The last villain, the one who's been in front of our face the entire time, who is essentially at this point our arch-nemesis, has gone forth to create a battleground for one last epic showdown. And so even knowing it's a trap, we march forth into the unknown, and there the expansion begins. And for Final Fantasy XIV, instead of Sylvanas, it's Xenos. And we're all like, this asshole's gonna go merge with Zodiark and become some final villain. It's
kind of, and I would say, I kind of understand what you're saying, but also, Xenos is never our friend. Sylvanas is a little different. And Sylvanas is different because there's two Sylvanases. There are two Sylvanases. There is the pre-BFA, or I guess maybe even pre-Legion Sylvanas. And that Sylvanas was one that a lot of people felt was truly morally gray and was there to protect the Horde. She wasn't a good person, but she was there for the Horde, the Forsaken. The reason, so like, in a lot of people get this wrong. So if you're in the chat right now and you're going, that's not true, she was always a bad... Listen, Sylvanas defended the Horde because the Horde are the only group to give her people shelter. She doesn't like the Horde, but she defends the Horde. The Forsaken are the only people she likes. Like is loose. She uses them as arrows in her quiver, and she values them as arrows in her quiver. She doesn't want them to die. She thinks them dying is a very big waste of who they are. And a lot of this stems from the fact that the human races treated them like garbage. As soon as they broke free from the Lich King, they went to the human races to try to seek sanctuary. They were given away. They were forsaken, which is why they're called the Forsaken. And they built who they were. And then Sylvanas became a great leader who was not afraid to hit the nuclear arms button and plague an entire city if it meant that her people were going to advance in some way. Which is bad, but if you're on the winning side with her, it's a good thing. So then it's called morally gray, because she's doing bad things for good reasons in the eyes of the Horde, right? After Legion, she became very self-centered. It went from I'm doing bad things in the name of the Horde and the Forsaken to I want to be immortal forever and I'm working with the jailer. And that moment that changed in the narrative, everyone who liked that character got mad. And I was one of them. All right, dude. Enjoy your day at work. But yes, that is what happened, and that's why there's two Sylvanases, and it's very frustrating.
Seemed like a pretty easy theory craft. But when we, the player, finally stand face to face with Zodiark, everyone playing was asking the exact same question. Hold up, why are we doing this at level 83? We're not even halfway through the expansion. That's right, the game pulls the old switcheroo on you, and the big final boss we've been promised for 10 years is defeated. Oh, but remember that little tidbit about Zodiark being the thing that stopped the mysterious song? Well, it's back. And so, early in the expansion, the story completely shifts its focus to stopping this mysterious force we've never met before and honestly, have never really cared about. And this is when the Final Fantasy XIV team spends the next 20 hours of gameplay showing you why you should care. Sure, they take us to new places, we meet new characters, but the focus is returning to the places we know and love. The world you, the player, have been defending for a main game and 4 expansions is literally on fire. The same chaos that's...
The thing that was cool about all this stuff, was the horror aspect. If you're into horror, this was sick.
Swallowed the world in the past is happening again. Except instead of just being told it happened, you're now seeing it happen in real time. People are dying, cities are burning, and those people who still live are wailing with despair to the point where they turn into literal monsters, who then kill more and cause more destruction, and then in turn create more monsters. It's absolutely terrible. But it isn't just the stakes we're shown, we're also shown why it's all happening to begin with. Our old enemies, the Ascians, which have been a thorn in our side from the beginning, long ago, in the before times when they were known as the Ancients, beings of unlimited and unparalleled power, it was, unbeknownst to any of them, one of their own that set all of this in motion. You know, without getting way too into it, and there is a lot, imagine if you had unlimited power, lived forever, and every single thing you ever wanted, you could just will into being. It was a perfect utopia. But just like when you see a rich dude who's also really depressed, having it all doesn't mean that you're happy. And one ancient felt this very way. As he slipped further into depression, he decided to create a multiplicity of messengers, his little birds to fly across the stars in search of hope. Surely out there, somewhere amongst the stars, was his answer. Surely someone had found a reason for him to keep going. And his little birds, these childlike beings of wonder, were designed specifically with emotionality in mind. And in their mind, their whole objective was just to come back with some good news for Dad. And so these little bird children, made of pure emotion, venture off into the stars.
I love his description.
For a
On
man
point.
who has none, and run directly into the Fermi Paradox. Now, if you don't know what the Fermi Paradox is, I'm not going to deep dive it for you. Just go Google it. It's fascinating. But the general gist is, if the universe is very, very old, and there are countless galaxies, and in those countless galaxies, countless worlds, then we most certainly would have seen some alien civilization. So why don't we? And the philosophical, scientific theory crafting begins from there. Trust me, read up on it. It falls directly into the existential dread category. And Final Fantasy...
I don't know what the paradox is, but I can assume it's the idea that every civilization eventually figures out that there's no reason to go on, and they all perish, which I think what happened in Endwalker. Like, a lot of these civilizations just didn't go on because they realized that it was just going to be death and blood and war, and it wasn't worth continuing, which I believe was the idea.
Fantasy XIV doesn't shy away from this. Yes, his creations do discover there's life out there, but the answer to the question of, is there hope for me out there? The answer isn't one that he's gonna like. Every single world and civilization, no matter how big or small or powerful or collapsing or polluted or whatever, every single one was engulfed by hopelessness and despair. And realizing that there is no external hope or joy for their creator to bring back to him, they come to the conclusion that this is the fate of all living beings in the universe. Even the universe itself in time will come to a dark, sad end. And so they join together for one final song to end suffering and despair and to grant one final kindness, oblivion. Like I said, it gets dark. And I'm sure by now you're like, okay, Jesse, I get it. So the difference is essentially you're fighting the concept of death in Warcraft and the concept of despair in Final Fantasy XIV. And the reason 14 works so well is because you gave a detailed backstory, and it makes it hit home why it's important.
Yes.
And you would be totally wrong. Because the reason 14 is better has nothing to do with the backstory of the villain. Your character has spent numerous expansions facing hopeless situation after hopeless situation, always emerging victorious. It's a theme of the game that you aren't just a mere adventurer anymore. You're a beacon of hope that lights the way for others. Your actions, even the smallest of kindnesses.
Sure, that plays a role. But really, when you boil down the problem with the story, it's that we know a lot about the background of the characters towards the end, and the reason why Endsinger came into existence in the first place, and how sad her background is as well. So, yes, but no.
Inspire others to be better. And now you're probably like, okay, so there's a lot of emotional resonance that connects this expansion back to older expansions. But even that's not the complete answer. Because the real reason this boss works is something I think the developers picked up on early in telling this story. Creating a moment like this to end a 10-year story arc in an MMORPG where everyone's experience is a little bit different, the only way to deliver that boss fight is to, one, acknowledge this journey was never about the character. It was about you, the player, who's going through your own shit, and your own struggles, and the entire expansion is an acknowledgement that despite any despair in your own life, you're still here.
Yes. But if that last boss was not built up the way that it was, the moments with Xenos, the moments with, everyone else, Emmett Selk, would not have been as good. That's just the truth. There was multiple things to fight for in that moment. It was our friends, us, the safety of that little bird we helped throughout her past. Like, that safety and trying to bring her back was also a huge motivation for me, at least, Like at the very end, it was like that was like one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to finish it. It was like, oh, I get to fucking ride Xenos like a goddamn snowboard into combat, and then I get to fucking possibly save this little girl who is just a child at the end of the day, right? Which is what I really was looking forward to. Now the jailer I have no background for, right? So that's really what it comes down to for me.
And 2, fan service. Lots of
fan service is so important.
Together,
Blizzard, please.
Well, it's another trope, but honestly,
fan
it's
service.
one
Come
of
on.
my favorites. The game reminds you that everything you've done up until now has mattered, and every person you've met, just like in real life, walks away with an impression of you. And in this game, you leave a great impression, because as the final day approaches, the people of the world unite behind you, friends and former enemies, to help rocket you to the stars. Hell, even the primals, the very gods you've gone up against countless times, offer themselves up to power your ship to the stars. And don't even get me started on the final zone. It is designed to make you cry, a tribute to all who have given so much to help your character get there, their voices cheering you on to the end. So it should come as no surprise that when you stand there, 1v1, facing the Endsinger, you're interrupted by your arch nemesis, a character you've been battling for some time now who just wants one final throwdown with you. And there he is, totally confused
to
as
help
how
you.
on earth
Let's
this thing is still
go.
alive.
I take it this is your prey. But why does it still live? Surely it is no match for you.
I love that. I love
I
him.
assumed you would be above something so banal as despair.
I love him so
He
much.
sees this fight for what it is. Nothing that can stop you.
So come, let us dispense with this distraction, you and I.
And so we ride into the final boss fight on the back of our arch nemesis to a medley of previous final boss music. The final encounter of Endwalker isn't about the boss, it's about you. The road that you've walked, the hours and hours you, the player, have put into the game. The musical medley is a reminder of that. But like any
Okay,
good final
kind
boss
of.
fight, there's
Yeah,
a second
all
phase.
right, fine.
This isn't their second phase. The Endsinger thinks they killed us. This is our second phase. And the boss music is our theme song. Yes, it is literally a power of friendship moment, and honestly, it's perfect. And just like when you play a boss for the first time and don't know the mechanics and suddenly they gain all their life back, the Endsinger goes from strategic attacks and throwing planets at you to now wildly flailing in order to prevent the light from engulfing it. Because despite knowing that the Endsinger may be correct, that in the end we all fade away, you never lose hope. The Final Fantasy XIV writers saw what they had to do, make this trope about another big bad who's way worse out there, and not only did they set out to deliver a backstory, but they also made it clear that that part wasn't even all that important, because the real story is acknowledging where you started.
Man,
where
that's so
you've
visually
been, and
impressive.
those you've
That
met
fight was
along
so
the way.
good.
The good, the bad, all of it. Not just in a video game, but in your life. And that shit is universally beautiful. And so we circle back to World of Warcraft, which seems lacking in comparison. But because of who I am, you know I can't just let it sit at that. I have some ideas of how I would have changed Shadowlands. And trust me when I say I've thought about this, it's not even that complicated. I don't have to change the theme or even the overall structure of the expansion. Shadowlands could have been roughly the same, except the focus always should have been on fan service. Just like a quick social experiment, if you'll allow me. You've died or taken a weird portal, you're in the afterlife. Is your priority going to be deep diving the political infighting and machinations of various factions? Or would you go find a lost friend or family member?
Yeah.
Maybe plan a lunch date with a dead
Yeah.
celebrity you always admired? Why they thought anyone would give a damn about the truly unimportant characters that manage the afterlife. The focus of the expansion from the beginning should have been
Arthas
about
and
giving
Varian.
send-off to the characters players both loved and
Garrosh.
hated for the last 15 or 20 years. Just giving the players that little bit of closure on just a few storylines would allow them to finally work in all those other characters that have to sit on the sidelines for every other expansion. Also wrapping up plot points like, oh, I don't know, the giant sword, or the fact that everyone's favorite Janai is now a literal genocidal maniac. So like I was saying, we don't even have to really change that much. We can work with the zones we were given. The plot of Bastion should have been about Arthas, Uther, and Jaina coming together and forgiving each other. Maldraxxus should have given us some amazing send-offs to heroes that we've known throughout the series, like Saurfang maybe meeting his son in the afterlife, Bane and Cairn getting closure. Hell, the group of them could have teamed up in that zone, and then it would have made the scene later where Anduin breaks free all that much more special, and then waiting for him there would have been his father. That's such a good emotional moment. All the support in his life helping him through that moment.
That is the single-handedly best fucking moment in that entire expansion. And you know why? Because fan service. Because Saurfang and Varian show up and are like, dog, we fucking got you, bro. That is the best moment in World of Warcraft for me. Like, beyond like, oh, it's the Lich King. Like, Blizzard has never done fan service as good as they did right there. Perfect.
Come on. Revendreth would have been about the villains we fought and potentially seeing another side to them. Maybe underneath all that hatred and anger and rage, there's some good in them. Except Garrosh, who is still an unforgivable giant piece of shit. But then seeing all these other people change, maybe even Arthas can be your guide through this area, add some even more weight to his character and his unwillingness to budge. And then Ardenweald, I honestly think what they have in the game already is pretty good, close to what I would have done, but it would have been entirely about Tyrande coming to grips with her failure.
Speaking of, real quick, Garrosh in this scene actually went out like a boss. He could have went out more badass though. I mean, they could have done more for him. But he goes out being like, I'm not sorry for fucking anything. And then he puts on his sunglasses and he kills himself. He kills himself by destroying somebody, but it's like, it's totally what Garrosh would do. And it was really well done. Would have been cool if it was like, jailer, go fuck yourself, and he jumped at the jailer. I mean, that would be cool too. If you like, I don't know, broke like a plating to give us an opening to kill the jailer. That'd be dope too. Like, but I feel like he could have been more important instead of being thrown in at the last second, because it did feel like he was thrown in at the last second.
Unwillingness to budge. And then Ardenweald, I honestly think what they have in the game already is pretty good, close to what I would have done, but it would have been entirely about Tyrande coming to grips with her failure and the people that she lost forgiving her. We keep the dragon plot stuff and we use that as a through line for the next expansion. Now, why did we do all this, Jesse, you may ask? Well, it all comes together in the final fight, where, again, because who gives a damn about the jailer, this moment is for you, the player. This guy thinks he's some unstoppable evil that's gonna wipe out reality, but you are the champion of Azeroth, and this time you brought your friends. Yes, I am 100% stealing from Final Fantasy XIV, but some of WoW's best stuff is stolen from other games. So as you're battling the jailer with your raid, imagine it looks like he's gonna wipe you, and then the music swells, and from the sides, Jaina and Arthas and Uther appear, but wait, that's not all. Tyrande and the countless wisps of Teldrassil descend from above. All the warriors of the past, we're talking your favorite characters from the beginning. They're coming through portals like it's endgame. And just for good measure, Garrosh, who has been a dick through the entire expansion, who probably, in my version, would have been the final boss of a raid or a dungeon, he comes through like no one's gonna end reality unless it's me, you son of a bitch.
Fuck yeah.
Imagine how hyped this
Fuck yeah, that's what I want.
Not even a detailed version. That's just an idea. But
that's what I want.
Alone would have the
Give me that,
hyped for
Shadowlands.
countless expansions to come, because the payoff for caring was there. And it all comes back to that, really, acknowledging the people who play your game, especially in MMORPG, are your game. Without them, the world dies. It's okay to give your players something every now and again that says, we get you. And I truly, from the bottom of my heart, hope the new direction WoW seems to be headed with Dragonflight is the start of something new for the game. Because it's so sad that a game that I played for 15 years couldn't find a way to connect with me as a player in a setting that very much should have. Yet a game that I just started playing 2 years ago has managed to consistently and in unexpected ways do things that a lot of AAA game developers simply aren't willing to do. And so, to stick with the theme, I hope to see great things from both these games in the future, as we move into the next phase of their existence and beyond. And I hope you find the game for you. I hope you enjoy yourself, and I'll see you next time. Hey, everyone.
Absolutely. Final Fantasy XIV is the best story I have ever experienced, ever. In any medium and any type of story written by any author, Final Fantasy XIV has been the best story ever made. Maybe when One Piece finishes, it'll be the best story ever written, but right now, Final Fantasy XIV is king. Yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys liked the video. Give Jesse a